What is up, YouTube? This is your host, Ranee B, here to spill that homicidal tea. Today's blend of tea is Loyal Persistence Blend. Thank God for friends that don't give up, like the friend in this case. She didn't give up, and the homicide of her roommate in college was solved because of her persistence decades later. Thank God for friends like that. Before we get into it, though, let me also introduce you to our esteemed guest. It would be My Bangs, circa 1990. So if anybody has received a call from the 90s looking for their hairstyle, I have it right here. Thanks. Anyway, let's get into it. The solved homicide case of Angela Samota. On the night of October 11th, 1984, Angela Samota, a junior at SMU, Southern Methodist University for you folks that aren't local, she was studying computer science and electrical engineering. She had called Russell Buchanan. He was 23 at the time, and she had met at Andrew's restaurant on McKinney Avenue. Now, McKinney Avenue, the whole M Streets area, that is such a fun and eclectic upper class neighborhood. It has got the cutest shops by day and the most fun nightlife by night. It is so much fun out there. At least when I lived there. I mean, I'm not too sure about things now, but I'm sure things haven't changed much. Anyway, Angela asked Russell if he wanted to hang out with her and her friend Anita Kodala. He said sure. And she also called her boyfriend Ben McCall, and he declined because he had to work in construction, and lots of times they start early, and that's exactly the case with him. So it was just going to be the trio. The trio went by Lakewood's Boardwalk Beach Club before going to restaurateur Shannon Wynn, who was a huge presence down in that area in the 80s and 90s. He was a huge restaurateur. Well, he had a restaurant called Nostromo Restaurant. Now, they had dinner there and then proceeded to the other half of the restaurant upstairs called the Rio Room. It was one of those cool restaurants that turned into a dance club after 5. It was pretty neat. But they had a blast. They danced and drank and just had fun. Nothing overboard. I mean, this is a decent group of kids who like to get loose, but not out of control. According to David Skelton, a Rio Room employee, he specifically remembers Samota and her friends. They did not appear inebriated at all when they left around 1 a.m. Russell Buchanan was dropped off at his Matilda Street, see, M Streets, like I talked about earlier. Anyway, his apartment was by Anita's and also by Angela's. Anita Kodala was going to spend the night with Angela, but she changed her mind about spending the night whenever she remembered she had a football game to go to the next morning. That was pretty early as well. So, as a result, Samota dropped off Kodala at her apartment before bidding her farewell at her boyfriend's house. Actually, it was in her apartment. The duo, they exchanged a few words before she returned, Angela, to her Amesbury Drive apartment. At 1:45 a.m., she dialed Ben McCall's number. That's her boyfriend. As soon as he answered the phone, she said, "Talk to me." And after that, their conversation turned odd. I mean, it seems like she was nervous about something. Ben interrupted her strange tangent talk, and he heard a disturbance in the background. He asked her, "What's going on? Just tell me yes, no answers. What's going on?" Well, there was a disturbance in the background. See, she had acknowledged to letting a male into her apartment to use the phone in the restroom. She asked Ben if there was a payphone that was around there anywhere, maybe at the convenience store. Before assuring Ben that she would call him back, she informed the man in the background that yes, she had found a payphone that he could use and that she was going to take him there. Her boyfriend attempted to reach her again because she didn't call back like she said she would after she dropped the man off at the payphone. He received no response. This wasn't good enough for him. At that point, McCall drove to her house. Now, several times during the drive, he tried to call her on his cell phone in his vehicle. It was one of those car phones, actually, not a cell phone. But all of his attempts were unsuccessful. When he got to her apartment on the second floor, he knocked, but he didn't receive a response. He then tried to open the door, but it was locked. So he drove to the payphone that he told her about at the convenience store. She wasn't there either. So Ben knew something was up. So Ben McCall got into his car, drove back to her apartment, and on the way dialed 911. Officers met him there and they bashed the door down as they entered the house. And when they entered, they found Angela Samota dead. Her blood-soaked, naked body was scattered across her bed. Her eyes were wide open and her legs dangled from each side of the bed. Oof. An autopsy, it revealed that Samota had been stabbed 18 times in the chest. And 10 of those wounds, they passed right through her heart and lungs. I mean, this was somebody that wanted her dead. Now, according to the postmortem reports as well, her blood alcohol was only 0.09, and that's less than, the legal limit. She had been sexually assaulted, though, probably moments, if not seconds, before she was killed. After taking forensic organic material from Angela Samota's body, experts were able to determine the killer's blood type. Now remember, this was 1984, so that's one of the most frustrating things about these older cases. But bear with me here. Ben McCall and one of Samota's ex-boyfriends from her hometown in Abilene were the first on the suspect lists, but their blood types didn't match, so they were ruled out. Now, because Buchanan's blood type was a match, they placed him under 24-hour surveillance for the 6 months. During that time, law enforcement officers, they followed his every move, frequently picking him up from his job and or his home and taking him to the police station for more questioning. Officers were so persuaded that he was the killer of Angela Samota, they did everything they could to get him to confess. Officers showed Buchanan photographs of Angela Samota's body from the crime scenes, and they were saying, "You were upset because you wanted to have sex with her, and she didn't like you that way, did she? She humiliated you, didn't she?" The officers said things like, "You went down to her apartment, she let you in, and you forced sex on this poor girl, didn't you? You didn't, and she didn't like you, and you were mad about it, so you had to have your way with you, didn't you? Didn't you? Didn't you?" It was just a berating kind of. Okay. The officer says that. The officers, they even said things like, "You went by her apartment, you forced yourself through her door, you forced sex on her, and then she started screaming. You stabbed her in the back with a knife, and you stabbed her 18 times, didn't you? You stabbed, 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 stabbed." And they did that same thing that the prosecution will do in a court proceeding to put emphasis on how many times that this poor girl was stabbed. But it didn't work. It didn't break him. He never cracked. The investigation had gone cold by the summer of 1985 because no confession or forensic evidence linked him to Angela Samota's murder. After Samota's friend and college roommate Sheila Wasaki made almost 700 calls to the Dallas Police Department requesting that they check into Samota's case again, detectives, they told her they might resurrect the file. I mean, they said, "Lady, this thing is 20 years old. What do you expect us to do?" Well, she expected a lot from him. It was the time of OJ and NCIS, those kind of shows, CSI. They started popping their way through the public and giving everybody a glimpse into the world of forensics and how far things had come in terms of this technology. Well, one of the troubling things that I found whenever I was researching this case was that Sheila was the only one that called, from what I can see. So that just tells me it's not that people didn't care. It's just that they accepted that they'd never find her killer. And that sucks. But Angela's roommate in college, she didn't care. She kept calling and calling for 20 years. It's like everyone almost gave up. Everybody but Sheila. Now, this reminds me of a detective, Lynn Hunt, from the Jessica Dishon case. And I'll put the little link right here, but don't go see it yet. You got to finish this one first. But, oh my gosh. Now, Lynn Hunt, Sheila, just like Sheila, she would not rest until she finally could get through to them and just convince them that this is no longer acceptable. It takes one of these people to come in out of the dark and just light everything up with their persistence. And she's definitely one of those people. She was fueled by what she had seen a decade after Samota's death, watching OJ, like I said, and all that stuff. And this is when she also learned about the newest use of DNA samples. Knowing that there was blood and semen at the Samota crime scene, Wasaki kept calling the cops, pleading with them, look into her friend's case again. When they seemed not to listen to her, she took this case into her own hands and she earned her own private investigator's license so she could gain access to the samples herself after getting nowhere. Well, whenever the police department got wind of this and she went to them saying, hey, listen, you know what? I am privy to this now. I've got my license, blah, blah, blah. 2006, they were like, you know what, babe? We got you. So they reopened the case. The DNA, it took 2 years to analyze, but when it did, yeah, you probably thought the same thing I did, that it would be good old Russell. When they entered it into CODIS, they got a hit. That hit, that gift from God, you're thinking it's Russ. I know. I would too. We'd both be wrong. It actually matched a man by the name of Donald Andrew Bess, who was 59 years old. Bess was charged with the capital murder in the death of Angela Samota. Now, he was easy enough to find, being that he was already in jail serving a life sentence at Huntsville Prison for 3 earlier sexual assault offenses in 1985. Apparently, Bess was a convicted rapist, and he'd been on parole for 7 months before killing Samota. Way to go in choosing the right people to let out of prison. Anyway, detectives now theorize that Angela Samota's boyfriend, Ben, whenever he knocked on her apartment door, they believed that the attacker was still inside the apartment. And to think he still has to live with that sucks. But after a jury deliberated for less than an hour, always a good sign for the prosecution, Donald Andrew Bess was found guilty of Angela Samota's sexual assault and capital murder in 2010. That would be in June of 2010. He did receive the death penalty. Death dance. Yay! Bess later filed an appeal. In the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, they rejected it in 2016. Death dance again. Yay! All right, he's still rotting on death row. Thank God. Thanks to Sheila. Thanks God. Thanks to both. God bless friends like that. Where is everybody today? This was a while ago, right? Well, these days, Ben McCall, he avoids the limelight as much as possible. He never speaks to public or media outlets about Angela's case, and he doesn't really share much of his own personal life on social media. So as a result, there's really not a way for us to know where he is or what he's up to. Seems like, though, that this was done by design, so I stopped digging when I read that. Not only is it important to respect the victims in these cases that died at the hands of these horrific people, it's also important to respect the remaining victims as well. Now, what I'm seeing a lot in these stories, though, is that what we initially see as living victims, they're actually survivors. So they are strong as hell today because of what they went through. So that leads me to Russell Buchanan, who at one time was a prime suspect in Angela's case. Polar opposite to Ben, though.
I've thought a lot about how close I came to being charged with this crime. It's my understanding I was one circumstance away, which is an unbelievable feeling for me.
I recently met with Russell, and we went over from start to finish everything that we went through, and I asked him for forgiveness.
This crime got solved because of Sheila. She kept this monster off the streets. She deserves all the credit.
It was her persistence, her tenacity.
He says, you don't know and you don't understand how difficult this is until it's over. And he said, I guess that's when you understood that it's finished and it's done and that chapter is finally closed. He went on to say that despite being a very private man, he doesn't mind the public attention that comes with his name being linked to Angela's case because it causes him no embarrassment per se. He says, I don't want this experience to define me. However, it will always be a part of me. Again, these people and how they rise above these tragic events, it's so inspiring. I mean, it's pretty cool. But on that note, though, until we meet again, keep it together. Don't kill anyone. Stay beautiful, friends. And I will see you super soon. See you later.